because this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Come now, this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. I know we should always help our neighbor, especially in time of a natural disaster. But this is not the case with Guatemala, because the poor people will never see a dollar. Only a few rich man will start to get richer. To the prime minister be happy, like a letter, because
Mr. Politician, we got to change the plans.
God have mercy.
Mr. Politician, we got to change the plans.
This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Come now, this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Not an inch, not a foot, not a centimeter. We not go give up to Guatemala, because look what them do to the people of my color. If them speak too loud, true to get murder. Look what them do to the Indian Maya. Holy for them massacre. La mismo presidente quiere we agua, because this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Come now, this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Believe if you need me, if you need a soldier, just send for the papa, cause I'm a true warrior. Just send for Daddy Tracy and Rankin Jr. Just send for Bernie Mac and Kenny M. my brother. Send for Andy B, send for the mad rapper. Just set to Stone Jam, you are the commander, because this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. So listen to the lyrics where Papa a chat. Some people only see ya, some see further than that. From my observations, the plan of the Guats, yes. Plan of the Guats to make a quick attack. But if it come to that, me I go pick up the gat. Me I go lick enough shot on the militant. Me I go shoot the Indian, me I go shoot the black. Me just lick enough shot on the militant. What? Me why you carry this message straight to the top. Me here we have a lot of island on the sea, man. Because this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Come now, this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Papa. Belize we come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar, because this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Well, this one goes out to all patriots, all people who love them country bad, love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Papa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement.
And welcome to Sunday Review, Belize's only news review talk show where we make sense of the news. I'm the producer and host, Sister YaYa Marin Coleman. Our co-host is late. It's not like Brother Mutota, but I trust everything okay with us, so we don't get started late. So I have to go ahead and, make the show go through. So our guest today, of course, the big time people we got, because Brother Recommender is our brother from St. Lucia. I wrongly advertised that he's from Trinidad and Tobago. Apologies, brother. He's from St. Lucia, working in Trinidad. Good morning. We have Brother Doc Chaney St. Martin, who's an international technical specialist in water soil management. Morning, brother.
Morning, man. Greetings, and give thanks.
We had that Belize, and you say it rain at Trinidad.
Yeah, real rain coming down, man. Real rain. Since yesterday morning time, real rain coming down.
Good, thanks. Have you been to Belize before?
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. I've done a lot of work in Belize, and I've done a lot of work even down down by the banana area there. I did a lot of work with some of the farmers. I did some work right up in what you call that place again, man? Right where the 5 C's are. I did some.
Belmapan.
Belmapan. Yeah, that's my place, Belmapan. So I've done a lot of work in Belize.
Oh, yeah. Good. Yes, it's good when we have somebody who could relate to the geographical space. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I find you, well, I had to do research for you. I tend to get loud when I get excited, so I'm trying
That's fine, man.
to be loud. I'm going to tell you earlier that my preference is to work with everyday people like grassroots intellectual, because one of the things our sister Andai said, she's an ancestress now of Guyana, is that in the absence of impoverished people organizing from below, then a space was created for like non-governmental organizations and people with colonial papers called degrees to lead processes. And oftentimes NGOs are aligned with state interests. They're not, they're not about the people. So I know they have some scholar activists, and I really appreciate when our people, everyday people, go get their colonial papers, but very clear on who they are as a being. That is what centers them. They don't get defined by the colonial papers and position where they have and part and trouble. I don't got time for it. And so I do value that the energy I get from doing research on you, that you're very grounded as a human being, and how you approach scholarly research. I'm like, this is what we need. That technical language, we can't get to it. We don't understand it. So tell me a little bit about yourself. We could get to know you. Tell me what you want to tell me about yourself.
Yeah, give thanks, man. I'm glad that you started it from there, man. The grounding and knowing yourself. And I've always been fortunate to perhaps get into academia before. I know myself before I got into academia. That's really important, you know. So that grounding came from there, and the need for just not academia and also to do work itself to connect that is really the driving force, really the connecting force for that. So I'm originally from St. Lucia. When I grew up in St. Lucia, the typical route again, I was always fairly good at school. The typical route was to go to, the high schools, the higher schools, the elite schools and pursue careers like the medical doctor, the lawyer, the normal story, right? But from early on, I could not see how that fit at that time into the reality of the people. What should I do physics for? Should I do physics just for physics' sake? Should I do maths just for maths' sake? At that point, I was not seeing the connect. The only place I was seeing the connect to is agriculture, where I could literally see that I could use some of that information and grow food and do so and connect it to something real. So that is where it really began in terms of the love for food community. I grew up in the city, but most of my vacation was in the rural areas, and that was instrumental in the ground. And the people, the love of the people, the warmth of the people was really different. And this is where I saw so that is how I got into agriculture. My family is pretty medium in terms of three sisters, three brothers, kind of right in the middle. And going forward, when I realized that voice, we needed a voice to articulate all through, have that groundation, but also able to articulate it at the mid-level, the highest level, with that certainty and that whole clarity as to what is the purpose of it, to serve the greater people. And so that is my journey, more or less. I started, what pushed me was that curiosity and that thing to serve. In fact, most of my research that I would have done, I have been encouraged to pattern it, but I never went through that because it was never about that. It was really doing something for the person so that persons could really use it, as opposed to close it up and restrict the access of it. So that's me. I've been here in Trinidad. I studied a lot of places. I was very fortunate. I studied in Cuba as well, Israel, Canada, the States, etc., Trinidad, a lot of places. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is mainly because of the culture, to see the work, to see movements, to see the groundations, to see different perspectives, to see how you could harvest that and really translate it into authentic movements, etc. So I was very fortunate to be able to do that and have that drive to serve the people. So I'm here now with my family in Trinidad for a while. I work in 34 countries. And so again, you see some of these different cultural aspects and how you could actually harvest and make moves as it relates to the people. That's me in a nutshell, man.
Well, that really different. How is it that you came into your, because I'm sure as you move around, how much people you meet like you will know thyself, comfortably in their skin, and then use the colonial knowledge, primarily as a European worldview, for come up with solutions or analyze lived experiences. And I really value you sharing that you were fortunate and had the opportunity to travel, because even before you had internet, like people my age group, you travel by reading books, but you learn so much from other human beings and how to engage the earth. Most of it just really mentally colonized with only one European worldview. European value systems. And I even open for overstand that before the Europeans came, African and indigenous people lived in harmony with Mama Earth and all other living beings. The elements were our sisters and brothers and still are. So how you get that groundation as a brother from the Caribbean, and then stick with it, because you know, my God, granny, it tell a thing, but teenagers, you do your own thing. How is it that you got it and kept it?
Yeah, it was several things, man. I'll tell you this. I also did my fair amount of travel in the world for books as well. So give thanks for that. I also did a lot because through the elders as well and very pointed people in the community. I had a brother by the name of Junior Bousquet. You know, Bousquet is a very revolutionary family in St. Lucia. They have done a lot of work. Give thanks. I passed on. But a lot of what I, at that time growing up, even the books and what I used to read, I was always more non-fiction, you know, knowledge. I didn't have the time for fiction at all. I never felt I had the time for fiction. I mean, I've grown out of that. But I always was searching for something. The science always had me, how to translate that into action. And I remember at one time, you know, around college I was totally closed in my mind. And there was a particular course that came out, which was extension, agricultural extension. And that really hit a nerve in terms of when we were, a simple thing as to how to teach people, how to provide some of these services, train persons. When I started to learn all of these things that you have to consider the cultural background, the social thing, it just blew my mind, you know. And then I realized that it was more complicated than that. What I started to go forward with is when I realized some of these complications, and again, when I started appreciating more the literature and the movement, Caribbean literature first of all, then I realized that there was something missing. So for example, in the early on, even with the issue of Rastafari, I always used to say, well, hey, because my Eurocentric mind was there, where are the books that I could get on Rastafari? At that time, it was very limited for me to actually understand it. And I criticized it for that. But what I learned from it, therefore, is the liberty was more important, and this is where the veterans in the community and the different persons stood out. I was searching for literature when the source of it, how persons live, was right in front of me. You understand? It was right there, but because of how my mind was phrased, I could not see it there. So when I started engaging, and that's one of the wonderful things about it, with the liberty, the persons in it, right there, the direct source, not translated in the book, etc., seeing how they live, feeling their warmth, etc., that is when, for me, it opened up a whole different thing for that groundation and going forward and putting these things together, realizing that, you know, life and the whole liberty, how you live your life, is more than the academics, it's more than the books. Sometimes the source is right there, whether you say indigenous, etc., they're there. And so I was quite fortunate at some time to have certain persons with that groundation in their life, etc. I would say, to answer the question, there have been persons, because, I don't know, when the energy starts to go, you tend to attract certain persons in the circle. So again, I have been quite fortunate to meet persons that are just like that, in terms of still having that firm groundation, but still knowing how the academics, non-academics play in that and actually balancing that off to an ultimate positive energy. So that is it for me so far.
I love it. I love it. How do you operate within that academic sphere? That not for me. I've tried. It worked for some people. It don't work for me, because you would have to be centered internally to walk in both worlds and then remain true for yourself. But I find, no, I do need some people on the inside for teach me on the outside, but I don't want any people. But how has it been for you? Do you see the impact of you staying true to yourself within your sector? Like in a rubber for anybody, then they really hear you, then they present differently, then they incorporate your creative analysis in policy. Like, tell me about that.
Yeah. So just to clarify too, you know, I have gone so far. I have balanced both the academic and development. Before, most of it was more academic because I used to work for UE and other universities. And so a lot of it was academic, but now even my work is more development. So the tilt is there. So that development angle is there. the issue of the academic, and that's the thing for there is a tendency for some persons, and you see it rightfully so, to be very apprehensive about the academics, yes? Rightfully so. But for me, these are instruments. These are instruments as part of yourself that if the instrument has a potential to serve your cause, I think that you should try to master it and use it, right? Not to say that it does not have the use, but with anything else, with any technology, how you use it, once you're centered and you know that, okay, this is what I'm doing, and also you don't have the biases to create things that are just in line with what you think, and you remain open to certain influences, then I think that that is a healthy thing. So the academic, not the traditional academic like how persons know it, it does have its role, and I've seen a trend of persons trying to use it within that manner that we speak in. So that for me is very important. The other aspect of the developmental sister is, for me, all of them is a whole, right? I do not see them as separate things. I see that the holistic movement of different aspects, if you are centered and you're able to indulge within that center, then there's not an issue, right? And once you have your clear values, ethics, and moral compass, and your worldview seasoned, and you have that potential, I think it's very good to show it, because I do think that in a lot of aspects, even if you remove the academic label and you start thinking more deeply, meaning that do we have people that are able to develop our own learning systems, our knowledge systems, right? Is it that we are still dependent on what is coming out there to develop? Are we thinking differently, and can we articulate that thinking from where we are? Then these skills become important to advocate for that and develop that thinking system that perhaps may be different from what we traditionally know. And that is where it's very critical to have these skills and to see where things, because once you have that, that means the scrutiny of it in terms of the validity, it is unquestionable. And then you could put that into the technologies, into what your people need. So these things are very, very important once you're grounded and you're balanced, to have that shift there. So that's what keeps me driving in terms of a curiosity as to how we could translate that, make sure that these voices are there and translated all throughout the systems, and it comes back down in a kind of a loop system.
Sad to say, I would say that now, like you rare, and I talk to enough scholars, enough. And some of them are just straight scholars, and they're not because I can't use the information, but what you said is a mouthful, because we don't want people who are just the parrot. Like, we saw a bunch of the colonial papers, they can't come up with an original thought. You present something new to them outside of what they teach them in a school, and they last. They don't have the confidence to even say, I don't know, teach me. Like, that make one difference to me. So like you, I want to definitely bring you back. I say important that we have their frank and open conversation, because nobody else gonna share this. And especially the younger sisters and brothers, for know, when you born in our system, when we validate you as a human being, one melanated person, for here and see somebody will look like you and know, say, like, this really doable. And that's why I say, honor the people and save the people. Tell me what one international technical specialist in water soil management do. That's a lot of words. But wait, what that mean exactly?
Yeah, like, I don't know, it was pretty research, etc. I wasn't really going to introduce myself, because that's just a title of a position, right? Really and truly that position, and for me this is something more personal as opposed to institutional. That is connected to an institution, and again, that is for me the groundation and the balance. What I'm doing here, it is not necessarily connected to the institution that I work for. But in terms of being an international specialist, it is where your expertise is recognized worldwide, that you are seen as an authority in the area, and that particular work is that you help governments across certain countries develop proposals, initiatives, ideas to translate the talk into action. And so a lot of it will involve capacity building, development of projects, programs, etc., on the specific area that you specialize in. And so that is what it is really and truly. As it relates to that, you have that kind of capacity to do that on an international level, and you're able to make that connection for developmental purposes.
I never hear about a profession yet. They have other people like you from the Caribbean who have that same kind of specialization.
Yeah, so that the difference is that so for example, a lot of the international organizations, most time you work for an international organization, if you are serving beyond just the country and you are serving many countries and you have the requisite qualification and experience, then you meet that international professional, they call it, an international professional. We have, and let me bring it to that point, we have quite a bit in the Caribbean in terms of, I mean, not very much, but we have enough in the Caribbean, even at my institution and other institutions, that have that specific skill set or in different areas, not just soil and water. But they, because of their experience and also their education, etc., they would be specialists, international specialists throughout the Caribbean or the globe.
Respect to that, the personal is political. So I really, and again, I never expect for the host the show by myself, but I cool it in it. So I really like how the vibes just to work out that you start off with the personal and then the going to the institutional position because sometimes people don't make that distinction that I am not my job title. Like I am a human being, this is my value system, so that's why I could get in at their systems here and do the work where in the best interest of the people and where I serve, because then people nurture me and my granny, grandpa for me what they are today, because I don't lose myself. And this is what I said to young people. When you go for higher education, colonial papers, and you don't know yourself, it's problematic for people like me where the movement work. Because it's about the liberation of our people and them knowing themselves authentically, mind, body, spirit, and being true to that. And it's not if people like you, that if you like yourself. And know that you have one duty. The only reason, far as I'm concerned, that anybody will seek higher education that for the liberation of the people and community. But from a European point of view, that usually self, material gains, financial secure, travel around, that on social media. What is that doing for your community? And so I am just hopeful with you that you got in a clear eye, thanks to the people in your community or family, where you, over a period of time, and have stayed true to yourself. Now,
Sister, let me come in there, man. Let me come in there, man, because that's an important thing you say, man. Yeah, you see, again, from the young age, young time, younger times, I would say, one of the issues for me is, for some reason, I had a sensitivity in terms of appreciating the efforts that, or what people around me meant, right? The community, the friend bedrooms, the friend sisters, the elders, etc. And so much so that even when I entered that formal education, or higher education as they would call it, when I entered into whatever I got, for example, my PhD, I dedicated it to the family and to the community, etc. And that is why when I was telling you, sister, and that I refused to patent anything, because it was never about that. It was about how people could use the research that was done in a practical way. My research focused on creating compost as quickly as possible using low technology, right? And my thing is that I understand the pressures with the communities and the farmers in terms of not having much, but I also saw opportunity that what they were having, they were not using the best. So for example, I saw an opportunity for using the grass that was just being cut. I saw opportunity for the fig leaves or all of the rubbish that was on the farm. And I'm saying, hey, I know things are rough on your side in terms of the constraints, but you could use this instead of buying some of the fertilizers, buying some of the pesticides, etc. And so my work really focused on how you use this waste material and translate it into products, which is a fertilizer, a soil amendment, a pesticide, and how you could actually, I developed a technology just using a barrel that you can make the compost within 19 days as opposed to the 3 months that, that is customary. And all of that, obviously, as you would say, individually, if one wanted, they could have patented it and they could have done it. But I decided that from early on, it was never about that. And so it's there. The technology, the material is actually there. And that was my giving back, recognizing that, hey, where I'm at and what I was doing there is not me. I had that support there, and it has always been to make that connection back. So I think that that's very important what the sisters say in terms of true education. Right? It is not an end point that you get a degree, it stops there. It is not a self kind of thing that you just do and it's only for yourself and you go forward and that drives it. Certification maybe, but not education.
I'm excited. I mean, as earlier, from all the countries where I work, is there any country in the Caribbean that you could name and say, they take a long time for listen, but they listen to my guidance and they implement what I say, and the people have now owned the process. The people are actively involved. I mean, whatever project it might have been, because they did this for a while. And we good for got conferences and produce papers in the journals and get recognition. But the people are going to say, we don't have we near ring up Belize, but we don't know nothing about this. What we got for doing this? So is there such a country that you could name?
Yeah, there's several, man. Give thanks for that. Belize is one of them, man. Yeah, surprisingly, man. Belize is one of them. I could tell you that there was this project, again, with bananas. And you know how bananas down the south is very big. The Toledo thing, very big. And so we were involved. It's when I just joined the institution. And we had this project. We had to develop a project. When we developed it and we executed it, the country, we have an ECA office as well, so they were very instrumental. And at the end, I remember when we started off, there was a particular farm that was the lowest producing farm, right? And the project was just 2 years. And in that 2 years, after we would have given them all of the materials and all of the training, etc., they moved from the lowest to the biggest producing farm here, right, in that short space of time. And I remember, it is very memorable because I remember in the closing off, I came back to them and I was using the data that we got from the field in terms of the production data. And I was carving out this story and I was saying essentially that, hey, this farm is the lowest producing farm. And before I was finished, because I wanted to say it was the lowest producing farm, I said 2 years ago. Before I was finished, one of them raised, no, that's not so. I said, no, I know. This is where you're at now. And so there was a pride with it that, hey, we're no longer there. And so Belize is one of them in terms of that. And several things in Belize. There is some in Barbados as well that I've seen. Trinidad right here in terms of using nature-based solutions. Even certain things like contouring and vetiver, etc. I've seen that. Antigua and Barbuda. I've worked a lot in Barbuda as well. So the sister mentioned that there's a veteran of mine there, very good, strong veteran, Mr. Massington, very, very, very good. All right, so I've worked there, I've seen it there. We have seen some of the assimilation in a lot of the countries. Suriname is the next one too. I've worked in Suriname, I've seen some of that there, Guyana as well. So there have been some uptick in some of the countries for sure. St. Kitts as well.
Good, small word, brother. John Mussington, one of my good fire stick brother. Last year, what was it? May, I think? Global Legal Action Network sent for just gone protest with them that the UN CICA conference because they invite the bag of money people in what they the European for the disaster capitalism. And the people of Barbuda were not invited to the table, but then they sell out the people in land to these developers, and they invite the developers and their financiers and never invite Barbuda land defenders. So they protested. And so I known for protest, so I sent them for going protest. So I've been to Barbuda as well. Give thanks, it's a small world, and you connect. So that another thing I tell people, when you go to a people country, how you know who to link with? You don't know the people in another country. I always kinfolk and our kinfolk. You don't know people, but people. Anyways, I've never heard that story before, you see? That one story, that banana story. And if that I'm in the project what Dwight Neal with the work pan. I know he was working with a banana industry.
Who is that?
Dwight Neal was his name.
No, I don't know Dwight.
It wasn't. Okay. But like that one story, I see that the way at the top about. These are the kind of stories we need to hear about because it gives you hope, it gives you inspiration, it gives you courage to know that people are actively involved, again, with academic guidance, to solve an issue that they may have been living with for a period of time. We have to take our first break, but I definitely will get a lot. So now when I come back, I asked my brother for talk specifically about We always say about climate change, climate change. And most people don't know what the hell are climate change. They're hot right now, I believe. More hurricane they come and they roll for one they come. With a deal with flooding, then they chop out the mangrove there. But if you, most people still don't know what climate change is, and I think we need to couch it in our language where people could relate to how we live every day. So we could say that individually and collectively, we have one responsibility that for we own for life. Whether we know it or not, every time we breathe, we are climate change at 101. So for talk some more about climate change, and then also we talk about food security. My gosh, most of the Caribbean countries, from the time when we were colonized or people were enslaved, they eat imported thing. And no, COVID-19, they did do a thing now. COVID-19, I said some more, yeah, some people, yeah, and get that credit for that. Even at a yard, not a house, they grow one thing. But we have another hour we are stretch talking about it. And stay tuned with the good brother from St. Lucia working in Trinidad, brother Doc, Chaney St. Martin. Stay tuned, quick break.
20 years ago, we built
to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This a we we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me. My name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me. My name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody.
I'm still hearing the. Thank you. And so we're back. And so I asked Brother Chaney for share it in our language, and this is what he think. This is what he known for. He stay up on the ground with people and talking our language where we can relate. Tell me what the climate change and why it matters that the everyday person really get what it is so that we could actively participate in finding solutions to this global issue.
Yeah, man, good choice. Let me try that, man. In a very simple terms, and we have to think deeply about it. Climate change is what you have been accustomed to for the last 30 years in terms of the weather, in terms of the pattern, the dry season. That is changing. So if you have been here literally feeling the climate for 30 years, you are now going to see a difference. Whether it is temperature difference, whether it is rainfall difference, you're going to see a difference. So that is the fundamental thing. And that time that I said, the 20 to 30 years is very specific for how we craft the definition for climate change. So it is not a 10 years, what you're accustomed to 10 years. It is what you're accustomed to by the 30 years trend in terms of the climate. It is going to be changing, or it is changing actually. So that is the fundamental thing. So if you are accustomed over the 30 years that every time you come up, you have the water, the dry season starts in May, in that period, it ends in that period, etc. And then you still get a lot of rain in between that. That is what you're accustomed for the last 30 years. We are saying that is fundamentally changing, or it has changed, where the dry season might start earlier, it might start later. You might not have so many rain days in the month. So these are the changes that we are seeing. So in very simple terms, the climate change that we relate to is that we are saying fundamentally what you are accustomed to in terms of the weather, the climate, all aspects of weather, rainfall, etc. for the last 30 years, it's not going to be like that, right? And we'll use a particular benchmark, a particular part to say, well, hey, this trend is not going to continue. Now that has a lot of things, and I would prefer if you direct the question, in meaning that how we see it, how we feel about it, how we address it, etc. These are very critical issues. Before you come in and assist, I'm just going to say that, and it's not normally something that is said. There are two things for me in climate change that's very important, and this is where even the conversation earlier on is important. I think that we need to understand it in its real aspect in terms of connected to the people. But I also think that the people need to be clear about it, to articulate it in any fair, whether it's the global level, so that the voices are heard there, it is there, and they could represent it from that point of view in terms of both on the ground and technical. The climate change that we are talking about, and I'm bringing another dimension in it, and that is where the importance comes in, because we often like to say we and the climate, the environment, we and the environment, as if they're separate. Right? It's not separate. We are in the environment. This is the ecosystem. This is where we live. It is not me and the climate. This is your home. This is what you live on. This affects you. You affect it, etc. So that's one of the foundational things. If we are talking about climate, it is not something outside of you or so far from you. It is something that you live with every single day. And so even from the point of how it affects you, you get a little hotter, you're a little jittery now, you can't focus, you know, just like my sister fan in there, you know. So you get that aspect there that, well, you're a little disturbed. And then if it starts getting hotter, it affects your mental processes, your emotional processes. The now, not what is going to happen right now, the now it is affecting your now. The rain, the hot nights, before your brain, normally if you could sleep for it needs to be cooler, then you get a better sleep, but the nights are hotter, so even your sleep quality is being affected. So it is happening now. These are things that are intimately related to every aspect of your life now. It is not something that will happen or something that only affects agriculture. So I wanted to at least bring that perspective in before we continue, Sister. Over.
That was excellent. Make I just, and I tell people learn from repetition. And that one big point you make, because even me, when I think of climate change, I don't think I didn't know. I mean, yes, I say I had, but I don't necessarily say, it happens to all that climate change, but we don't really know what that mean, and that the important that we know what it mean, so that my mantra is only the people and save the people. So when we talk to one another, when we talk anyway, whoever we talk with, we know why important that we need to be active in this climate change conversation, because it's have to do with everyday life, and nobody know how to look after for we interest like how we look after it. We have to stop to think, oh, somebody gonna study for it and so they know more and so they want to lead. No. One time mosquito they bite up with picnic. One time we have respiratory issues and we don't have money for go to no private doctor. If we another why I like having these conversations, because knowledge liberate people. The more you listen and you open to learning without judgment and questioning, it puts you in a stronger position for help yourself. So I really pleased that you make them 2 points, that climate change that now are we that climate change. That's something outside our liberty. So what happened for make, because were they wrong for billions of years? The earth they wrong. What happened for make this happen now? I mean, this are the earth. The earth pretty much take care of itself. That one natural process. How come the earth out of balance now to a part things that may happen regularly? Not happen regularly no more. What going on make we get out of sync?
Sister, I'm going to say something here, and most persons perhaps don't look at it from that view. But I was talking to my son about climate change, and exactly what you said there, in terms of nature taking care of itself, right? And I was making the point to him that essentially what we are talking about with climate change or anything that affects the cycle of the earth or nature taking care of itself, is a pollution aspect. And he was trying to wrap his head about it. Daddy, what do you mean by a pollution aspect? And what do you
How old
mean?
is he?
He's going to be 17. Right?
Okay.
I was
How
having
old was he when you were having the conversation?
He was 16, but I also was having the conversation. My daughter was at the back as well, right? So she was there. She's 8, right? And so I was having the conversation, and I told him about the pollution, and he said that, Daddy, what do you mean by that? You mean climate change is pollution? I said, yes, in the rooted way, it is, because we are talking about, and Sister, you said that the earth has this natural cycle to take care of itself. But I told him from my perspective, anything that goes beyond the rate of how fast the earth could heal itself is pollution, right? Because your pollution by the definition is putting something in there that is hard for the earth to deal with it in a particular way, or it is changing some part of the earth. And in that aspect, climate change, a lot of it is related to the issue of gases, carbon dioxide, right? Carbon dioxide, we have other gases, nitro, all of these gases that before were not there in these quantities or these concentrations, that were not being released so quickly that the earth is not having the due time to actually process it. And so for me, this is a pollution aspect, because you're telling me that beyond the capacity of the earth to handle it in a systematic way that it does not cause harm, that is affecting it. And so let's put it simple. It's just like me. I'm here. I could take some blows, right? I may be able to take some blows, but there's only so much blows that I could take to heal there. If you're hitting me with this blow, industrialization, you're pumping this gas into me. There's only so much of the exhaust from the vehicles I could take. I could take this exhaust there, but there's only so much before the body say, well, no, it reaches a limit beyond which we could think, and that will affect it. So this is what the climate change is. It is because of some of the industrial processes, some of the practices that we've had, industrialization, the emission of some of these gases, mainly by developed countries, right? I want to point that out, mainly by developed countries. Then we have that affecting the climate now, meaning that it is creating an environment where these things are staying around longer than it's supposed to. And because of that, it is quote unquote, some parts heating up the earth, some other parts causing the reverse of that. So that is really what is driving it. The industrialization processes, some of the processes where we create things and we release a lot of these gases far beyond the capacity of the earth to really process it in a timely manner.
First time I hear it like that, but you better believe I'm in right now. And it is said like, and that's why I saw all your children. Because if you could explain something to like 1 8-year-old, and 1 8-year-old get it, and I tell people, one effective educator could take the most complex thing and break it down to 1 8-year-old, and 1 8-year-old could get it. But not everybody either have that gift naturally or training a pedagogy for know how to do it, which are one of the reasons why I got, I never want to be a teacher. I never want to be a teacher, I never want to be a wife, and I never want to be a man. I don't know how woman get to be that thing, but at the time when I grew up, that's all I say pretty much woman do. So I'm like, I don't want to do that. So when I went on to higher education, I said that a lot of my teachers, they know the content area, but they're weak in our teaching. So I think I want to teach African history. So I gone and get trained in a pedagogy. And then when I got in the classroom, I said, oh, hell no, this and not. I was made to teach, just not in that kind of setting there. I don't want a popular educator where I meet grassroots intellectual and we could just reason anyway in that capacity there. So important that the people, like I feel like you don't want teacher even though you have your other thing, I think that one of the strongest way that you to teach is because your liberty, and then your children and they experience it. Your community they watch you and they feel a different vibration. Like this is different. So before be raw food is the Rastafari brass instead of the raw food is. You say what them they smoke their weed. No, you say take one while for the world catch up, but if you stay true to yourself and you know what you did a right living for you, your people on the earth, then you just have to trust the process by that. So I really appreciate how you broke it down so we could really get it. Now, what we could do, right? Next month, the hurricane season. And that like the same thing every time. You run go buy a whole lot of groceries because well, hurricane they come. One lot of we not the plant for whatever reason. I think more people, don't you think more people are planting now, especially since COVID?
Yeah, they had some highs and then they have some lows coming back. So with COVID, you had this, everybody wants a garden there. And now you're seeing people getting back accustomed to just going to the supermarket and get something. It's something I want to talk about a little bit as we go forward.
No, forward that conversation now because, like I said, hurricane season next month. And so one number of people unemployed, one large percent of the people not literate. And so you tend to just the way your mom, pa, and granny and grandpa me do. And whatever convenient when you hustle on money. If you get some tacos, that want cornflakes, that want whatever you could get, fried chicken, because that's what's convenient. Now you take one while for change the mindset. I mean, if you're not living in adequate housing, the last thing you think about is some garden or a bucket for a tomato. So I would really want to hear how everyday people were really in a survival mode. Like, what would I help to change their mindset? Because that's just real, right? Imagine you're let's say fourth generation. This is your yard, the yard then next to you. You wake up the man, the first thing is where we are eat. So you may either hustle last night or have to find something this morning for feed you, your children. I know that know that I'm money to hustle, you know. You might have to get in something for go to school with if you could. So I said people were in that and you stay in that mindset and then depend on politician or whoever could give you a handout. What part in that mindset they for process your waste differently, grow your food? Now big question to ask you, I know.
No, Sister, I'll put something here. Let me just start by saying that we have paid very dearly for the the feeling of convenience. I want to start it off like we have paid dearly for that, right? That's number one. And I want to give you a story as well. And this is what, for me, it is something that I'm still struggling with in terms of the mindset and in the change. Because let me give you the story. I remember there was an end of year thing right in my work. And at that time, I normally go in between sometimes, mainly because I with the kids. I normally eat raw food, more raw food is like you said, I'm more along these lines. But again, it's still, like I say, a struggle because my family doesn't eat like that. So sometimes because I love having meals with my family as well. So there's some periods I go into the raw food and I come back out and come in, etc. Right? So I remember there was that end of year thing, and because of how I eat, where I work, it's always like in their minds the most difficult things to get something for Chaney, right? And I remember that they had gotten something and they had gotten some vegetables, fruits at that time as the raw food and just the thing, and we were sitting there having it. And I took my plate and I just put everything on top of it. And they had all of the things, all of the meat stewed and all of the rice, da 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 da. And one of them watched at me and they told me, Johnny, I don't understand how you do that. That's so difficult. That's so demanding, etc. So I really paused and I said, really? I said, let me look at your meal. To have that chicken, that means you'd have gone someplace for it, take it out, clean it, put some seasoning on it, use fire, take it there out, package it there, and then come into me. I just have the fruit how it was from the tree. I probably slice it up on the plate. As soon as I'm finished with it, it goes back to the earth. I don't have to think of where to dispose it. And how come that is more difficult than what you are eating and what you have done? So somewhere there in the mindset, I say that here, that even when it's evident that it is simpler to live like that, to have the raw food right there, to eat simpler, that is being viewed as more complicated or difficult than the convenience, or the quote unquote, the convenience where you have to find. So for example, I could have eat very nicely if they had no gas, no fuel for the thing, if they had no seasoning, etc. I could have eaten. But for some reason, you couldn't have eaten because your food is dependent on having fuel, transporting it over there, cooking it there, mixing it, spending all of that time. My thing is just get it to me, cut there, finish with it, goes. And I couldn't understand how people couldn't see that as a simpler option than the other. So I say that there, sister, to again say that something has gone into our mindset that has programmed us to look at one convenience as the major thing and to look at only at this singular point when we are looking at it. We are not, again, connected to, if I do this, I am eating for a whole system. It is not for me. Because I am part of my environment and I'm conscious about that. It is not just about a belly full for me here. When I eat, the easiest thing for me to do, and it's not that I'm advocating one thing or the other, but I'm looking at the reality of it. How are you going to argue with me that the example that I gave you, when I'm simply taking a fruit, cutting off there, eating it here, is more difficult to live than what you have done there in terms of get the rice, get the peas, get the that, cook it up, etc., spend all of that time there. What kind of argument are you going to give me with me here? I'm saying this as to just say that there's a particular psychology and a narrative that has been embedded, and it came in my, at least for my time, more or less in the 80s, 90s here, that shifted it away. A lot of, for example, the supermarket culture, this culture, etc. Before that time, and if you look at the data, the issue of food security as to how we viewed ourselves in development in terms of that, it wasn't an issue of when you establish in a development or your home, it wasn't, okay, I'm going to sacrifice that for a garden. It was so principled that your space would have a garden, would have an area where the fowls, etc., could go forward. This was a principle-based livity, how people lived. And they lived because of that. And that's where you go back and see how wise the elders were. They lived because of that, because it provided them a way to deal with some of the shocks. You know, when things not going bad, I can't get it there, I could do that. It brought them a way to share with each other, to remain that kind of connection with their food. It wasn't just about eating the food exactly. So these are some of the things that for me in the mindset, fundamentally, if we are now prizing eating or living just based upon how convenient that we could be, right? I think we have an issue there, and that issue will continue. I hear a lot of times persons saying that a healthy diet is so expensive, etc. I have told from the research to address climate change, and this is a narrative that you don't hear a lot. To address climate change, you have to address the consumer preference. You have to address what the palate, how the palate is there now. For some reason, the palate is to enjoy things that are not grown within the space. Traditionally, that the literature is showing more and more that a climate resilient, a building that has to do with several things. One, a diet as close to home as possible. Number one, you eat what is as close to home, so you reduce the miles of any transportation, etc. You eat what you traditionally grow within your space. Anytime you start to do that, and the palate now is to get things from overseas, you are contributing to that problem there, etc. And so that is a fundamental thing that I don't hear most persons talking about. And this is where the individual has a responsibility. It's not the government do that. Your palate, right? Adjusting your palate to your surroundings here is very important here. And this is where I'm saying that, yes, there's a place where we could bash institutions. Yes, there's a space for you to bash international movement. But there's also a space to bash yourself in terms of how much do you know that you're reflecting in your liberty there? And at what price do you want to not do that and still complain about other things and contribute to the problem? And so this is a fundamental thing. I'm saying this unless we are consciously going to look at our palates, right? And address the palates and try to eat within the local context there, then we are contributing to a particular problem, a particular development, a particular lifestyle that may not be in the best interest of us in the Caribbean, or as we as African, or we as any people at all. I'll stop here for now.
Brother. Wow. No, the real is, and I keep saying, individual people go and leave blame, leave. But the system in of itself, this capitalist patriarch, the system not designed to look after the well-being of Mama Earth or human beings. That is system where we ban in a caught up in. So we could be very clear. We come from one, as indigenous African people, we come from that live it today. But times have changed. So when you just ban in our space, you tend to do what everybody else do. I banned in 1966, and at that time in the 70s, people had folk club. People had bat in their yard. They never have no bottled water. But the capitalism is real. And because at the time of so-called political independence, the people are never conscious to say, make we have one real decolonization process and find out what best for the people. All we just the masquerade as independent countries and really just want to be like massa. So when that is system, the only if you had a granny or had somebody in your family or neighbor will actually have the garden. And then COVID had made a good time for people to realize, listen, right now the cost of especially you see the tariff for Trump got where I know what creator will serve how much people going back or go eat out of the garden now because you know they make the money for buy the foreign food because they can't bring it in. But even so, when you look on the chemicals, like some years ago, and brother showed me the market, you look on the calalo, you see, you say, I white thing for that calalo, that the pesticide, that the poison. So even when we go to market, then we grow the thing there. We don't know what fertilizer, and we just go to market, go buy the thing there. And then thing go in of we body and they harm we. So it really best if you have, and I preach, I got acre land over so much years of harming the village, I do not know it. So I like telling, enter the top of the Venetian people, that mean you know the top book. I don't want them people there. And I know, like, knowledge-wise, more than a lot of people, and still I know, like, I don't go, I understand, I go put my hand in the dirt. So usually, I think it's very important to have somebody on your street or in your community where they live, because the best thing you could do is live the life. The best example you could do that. Not that was much attacking, their liberty. And then when people say, well, I know I got extra carrots, make a carrot for you, like, this carrot tastes different from the one in the market. And how much you carrots the market? The whole, so I really think we have to go back like door to door, family to family, and track it. Like if you go by one street and say, somebody need to take the lead and say, okay, you don't want tomato. But if we, and it's the kill way, it literally the kill way, brother. Like with a dead out trying to eat processed food. So I don't know, is there any way like that has done, like is there a particular community in the Caribbean, I don't have to go to a break, that has done the mind shift? Because they want process, it don't happen overnight, whenever it gets overnight. But I could have tried getting Alexei. Is there some process? I mean, is there some community that has done this? Like you could say, okay, the mistake so, but this leave black castle, that's the way now, then get it. And then they do it for like one. Is there any such communities?
Yeah, man. So let me give you a story of that as well.
I like story time.
And sister, what I'm advocating for, I do realize that there's a system there and that we have to address things systematically, right? But I always talk about the spaces within the spaces as well. It doesn't mean that while we addressing the systematic issues or the systemic issues, that we do not address our self issues as well in terms of a community issue. Right? Normally we think it's one or the other, but it's very difficult for us to realize that the pathways are converging and we need to do that while we're doing this. So let me give you an example. There's a community in Grenada that is called Windsor Forest, right? And Windsor Forest is there, and it was remarkable. I remember I went there. My wife is from there, so I went inside of there, and I was with my stepfather in the vehicle, and somebody pulled him up. And the man was cussing and getting on, and he that. So I'm wondering, but what is it that the guy is so angry about and he's so frustrated about? But I wasn't getting the sense there. So when we arrived home, I asked my father-in-law, what is it that the guy was so angry about? Livid, I tell you. The man said, well, Johnny, the man told me he had 2 sacks of sweet potatoes there for me for 2 weeks, and he begging me to come and take it, and I'm not taking it, and so he's angry about that. You understand? And so I say, really? And it is so interesting because, and that is how the community still functions. I'm not saying they don't have the convenience, etc., but that was so meaningful to them that it's not for him to pay for the bag of sweet potatoes, It is the same barter system that still exists there, that he was so angry that he has had that thing to give to him, not for him to purchase, and he has not been coming for it. So that in itself was a big issue for him. And I'm saying this foundationally because these are some of the real currencies that we had in the community there, that when we looked and we speak about each other, etc., where it was not just moving to what tide is coming. The whole capitalist, even predominantly, Grenada is still within the capitalist system, but you have pockets of rural communities that are still practicing that kind of barter. That I have the sweet potato, you have this, etc., and we exchange, and that is a critical element to them. So that's just one, and there are many other communities that are still like that. But the thing is, Sister, and I know you have to go to the break. The thing is, Sister, if this does not occupy our mental space, our conscious thing here, and there have been brothers and sisters advocating that we don't need to go full into this system, that we need to maintain some of our things, that there's space for it. If this is not consciously in your living and you're just seeing it as a dollar aspect, then it will become difficult. The dollar is important, but the dollar, when you look at it in the totality, you are going to see that a liberty, a way of living like that, it is actually cheaper holistically than the other option.
And then we palate don't get spoiled to the bad thing. We like taste, so we like taste. So I really want education process. I think you should have one podcast. I know you're gonna have family, but I really think you should have one podcast. And because you have the connection in the other Caribbean communities, to show people that this is one choice you to make. Regardless of your financial situation, this is one choice where you to make. And when you the adult make it, you to make it for your children and too. And we talk about the future of your quality of your life. So you say
thanks.
build it and they will come. So I advocate for your build it, build the podcast, connect Queen of the Caribbean, so that we could be empowered to grow our own food, for our own survival in this ecosystem. Okay, we're gonna break, brother. I could try getting, and I don't know challenges, but we're gonna break and see if we could bring in brother. I could stay with us. We're with brother Chaney from from St. Lucia, working in Trinidad. Stay tuned. Break time.
Moms continue
Okay,
to
brother
create,
Akko, make I
build,
see.
and inspire. So this Mother's
bad love them homeland. We'll never give it up to another nation. This a fi we we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a fi we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me. My name is Papa. Believe me.
Technical difficulties. He's trying to get in. We don't see him showing up as a participant. We don't know what it is, but we're really trying to get Brother Akko in this last segment. I'm here with Brother Doc Chaney St. Martin and with attack. Hi. Our responsibility as human being in the human ecosystem. We have a responsibility as individual and community members. Now, one other concern I have is that over and over again, you hear the state environmental NGOs getting a bag of money for climate change. There's a new buzzword, nature-based, whatever. And most time we don't know what the hell they're talking about. I really appreciate I like your storytelling. And you talked about that community in Grenada that still does bartering. That's another story we were here, and that within the capitalist system. And again, I appreciate, because I know I'm guilty of it, that we tend to look at things separate as opposed to the part of a whole, our human ecosystem, and everybody gonna party night. So with looking at it from that perspective, how involved are communities in solving food security, climate change? You up on the ground way more than we. And so we want to hear more stories like for everyday people. Now, remember now, this is where we come from, For we granny and grandpa and there's a farm, enslaved people, that even before we were enslaved, that we are the original agriculturalists, that we are the original solar followers, we African people, that are original. So this, with memory, with DNA, for live on the earth like this. But again, because of the colonization, mind, body, spirit, we get disconnected. So I want to hear more stories in the Caribbean way, because this one give we hope. I hope that give we hope that we have way tech for change how we eat, for the betterment of a lot of people are dead from diabetes, they get limbs cut off, high blood pressure, diseases that are preventable. And a lot has to do with how we eat. But brother, Doc, I had to tell her that sugar got to tangle up, brother. Sugar in everything. And it's nice. And I appreciate your honesty for saying your family don't eat like you. And then people here eat different than things say, they're just vegetables they forgive. I'm like, dang. So some vegetables, not because I don't eat flesh meat alone, vegetables they don't forgive me all the time with just bland, like I had a rabbit.
Yes, it's that's the normal thing, man. They're like, okay, if you don't eat this, then what do you eat? It's almost like so there are several things that I want to perhaps just put out on the table there, right? And I think it's very crucial for us to think of it. One of the issues is that the whole issue of food security, right? I am not one that I do understand the place of it in terms of the wider developmental conversation on the country on a regional level. I'm not too sure that that has resonated or that has come down on a household level in a way that is deeper, right? So for example, I don't know how many people would say, okay, in my house, I'm food insecure. I don't know how many persons would say, boy, one of my main goals in my house is food security. I know people say, I don't want to be hungry. It's an emotion. It's a straight ground root feeling. But I'm not too sure how many persons look at their daily life in terms of saying that, hey, my household is in food insecure. And so I'm saying this because, again, it may seem like a simple issue, but the whole issue of the food security, again, it has occupied a space that is very technical and developmental. And as much as they have tried to ensure that it comes down to the grassroots household levels, there's still a difficulty there. On the ground, when persons are hungry, hunger, people could feel, they could act upon. How food secure are you, sister? How food secure is somebody else? I don't know if persons, by the definition or by it, could actually say that or identify on their daily thoughts that, hey, I'm food secure, or I just like, man, I don't have enough money for the month, I have to do something. I'm not too sure whether it has resonated at that level as yet. And I'm saying this to say that, yes, we speak about food security. Whether food security boils down to the average household in terms of how they view it is another thing that I think we need to do some work there. It is still at the pace that my picnic, my thing hungry, I need to do something about it. The issue about food security is normally thought about in terms of the import. I could tell you before particularly in the OECS country, there was something called the preferential agreement for shipping to UK, Europe, particularly for major crops like bananas. Before that time, which ended more in the 90s there, before that time, there was not a food security, insecurity problem in most of the Caribbean countries, right? And so you have to watch at that, because right now we think that the Caribbean has always been food insecure, and it was so long ago before no. It was, if you look at the data, by the 90s, right, early 90s, we did not have this tremendous difference in terms of our food and nutrition insecurity. And so you begs the question, what happened there? Right? What really happened there, and why are we at this stage? Again, I would not go into the whole thing, but definitely what you saw is a trend now of importing. The imports of certain things increased. The amount of the value of what we were exporting in terms of our main crops decreased, or it was actually not available anymore. So even if we didn't used to produce all of the things we used to eat, what we produced gave us enough money for us to be able to purchase and access different things. And so therefore the balance between how much money we made from exports and imports, they were more or less leveling off. But when now you get less money than from what you're exporting in terms of food, and your imports start to increase, then you're in a position where your food security, or that imbalance there, really starts to resonate on a country level, on a household level. And so again, I ask you, most persons, if you look at your wallet and you start to take a charge and you say, how much money do I import? How much money goes out as opposed to how much money comes in? Right? If you look at that and you look at it in terms of the food that you're buying, then it almost becomes a thing like $1, every $1 you get in, you give out $7. So this could never be secure. And this is what I'm saying here. This is what the data is showing. Every $1 you earn, you spend 7 in some export kind of thing. How are you going to be insecure? And that's just on the dollar value. And so this is what I want to perhaps just bring in focus there immediately when we talk about food security. One, food security has to be said in a way that it resonates on the household level. You could identify it, whether it is through hunger in terms of that, whether it's through the money that is coming out, etc. That is fundamental. Number two, it still comes back to the same thing that we were discussing. The information is there. Whether it's for food security or climate, it is saying a diet that is closer to home, that is closer to indigenous, it is better for you and the environment and socioeconomic and everything. There's something called the Lancelot report that says that very squarely. The way that you use your waste, we haven't spoken about that as yet. The way that you use your waste, it is not just what you eat, it's what you don't excrete. That is the problem. And when you excrete it, how you use it, that is the problem. So most people say you are what you eat, you're also what you don't excrete. Because if it stays inside of there, something is wrong. And if you use it poorly, it's actually a problem as well. So on that issue, sister, in terms of the food security, that is a fundamental thing that I think that we have to start thinking of. In terms of success cases, there have been some success cases, both at the community level and at national level. For example, CARICOM is doing something that I think is good. It will take some time. They have a very active, what you call CPOS organization, looking at these trade agreements, looking at this. They have signed some holistic things to move forward. It has articulated on a national level in terms of the 20 by 25 by 25, etc. But one of the things for us, and you talk about the NGOs receiving a whole set of money. The first thing I'm going to say that to address the climate issues that we have there, we are not even seeing 10% of the money worldwide that is needed to do that, right? Because the cost of doing it is so much. That's number one. Number two is that even with the NGOs and the process, we have to know the process. And this is where I made the point earlier, sister, that we need to know the process so that we could engage it and so we could have fair arguments. When NGOs are getting money to do this, particularly when we talk about big funds, if it is not a priority of the country, you have to get the country endorsement, then these NGOs cannot get it. The NGOs and the countries have to be at the table. If you're not on the table, you are in the menu or part of the menu, or you're part of the dish. You have to have your voice there at the table to access these things there. Whether they're implementing it the best way and having the people there, that is another issue. And I'll give you one story, sister. About 3 years ago, right? There was a, no, 4 years ago, there was a big problem where we have these funds available, climate funds, and we have the food and nutrition problem, that is food security problem. But for some reason, the voice of agriculture stakeholders, they were not featured highly in that conversation. First of all, they didn't know, it was an awareness, they didn't know that these options were available. You see what you asked me, sister, one of the first things when you talk, you asked me about a policy, I tell you very clearly that I don't know about that. They didn't know that that was available. They didn't see the reason why they should engage it. They thought it was just an environmental issue. So climate change is just an environmental issue. No, it is an everything issue there. And so they stayed away from it. And so they were not in the conversation at the board, at the table, to be there to make sure that the voice is articulated there and the agricultural aspect is actually divided. In fact, what it resulted in is that less than 1% of these funds that were coming from the climate funds went to agriculture, while more than 40% went to environment, went to this, etc. So we're talking about something as basic as humans being able to eat, a basic needs. 1% is going to that, and the other going. So you see the imbalance there. And so we initiated a program where we could have the agricultural voices, the stakeholders, to come in there through the mechanisms at the national level to try to get these funds there to the agricultural sector. And so these are something important. I'm saying this because even the NGOs, and this is another thing, if we keep on doing things individual, each NGO for themselves, each country for themselves, what you have is a kind of a competition for what we could more collectively source and action. And so persons start to look at it or perhaps go through it for their own institutional survival or etc., as opposed to translating it to the action on the ground. And that is something that is a very thin line, but we have to keep our eyes on it and actually balance that as we go forward. I will pause there, sister, for you for reactions.
I really appreciate all that you said, but I could tell you from lived experience, brother. That believes my experience as a community worker, usually you have to work with political leaders, people in government. And oftentimes they're not genuinely receptive to hear. They might get on blah and listen to you, but you know they not hear you because where you share, not debated, not get input in a meaningful way, there's no feedback. So that's my first go-to, because oftentimes the state benefits from people staying ignorant, and the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So I'm surprised. So even when, like, that initiative you said you work with here in Belize, it might just be a news story. It don't make no connection to the people who they listen unless you're into banana industry. So the story not even told in a way where, like how you tell it just now, it make a difference to everyday people. So I really not find governments, and when they tell me about environmental NGOs, they don't work together. It is competitive. I don't know. All my skinfolk aren't my kinfolk, and I tell her straight, I know to work with you because you're not going on record of integrity. I don't want to work with people who I don't trust. So it really difficult. And again, and that because I have the time and energy for engaging, and I engage people all over the world. But when we did that Belize, so right now, I can give one example. The Blue Bond now a big conversation. The state never have one awareness campaign before they sign the Blue Bond. Now all over the world, Belize a headline news. Most Belizean people don't know what it's about. So both our organization and the Belize Federation of Fisheries, since the year started, have a once a month Blue Bond awareness. Now the bond done sign already, the house done out of the stable. But we need to understand the impact of it. Fishers have been greatly impacted, and all the environmental NGOs and they get thousands of that, and they won't give the fishers. No one they get it. They're like, okay, they have to micromanage it because we don't meet the criteria for we give them the money on the hand. We don't have to. Brother, these are human beings, adults with dignity. So the bureaucracy of the money is frustrating, and like people that beg them for more money. So really, there's a serious issue with established people who handle the money and everyday people. Right now, you have to work with the Legal Empowerment Fund, and we're putting together. It's like 5 countries, and say, listen, since owner the pan the ground the work, owner come up with the criteria for everyday people apply for funding, because the traditional way of applying for funding no one reach the people where they do the work. So there's so much going on, and then life to go on. Nobody not take time to really hear what people say, and then because of how people present. No, then once they want got colonial papers and then could talk only English, then things they're the expert. And then one time you come to the table and I make them know straight up. Most of them will sit down at the table ignorant. And I know my part and your part. So most people will not engage me because they know that I come from a position of confidence and knowledge, and I work for working class people. That's not a real brother. Even most of the no, you say you're a doctor. One said here, no, people come in the room now, which to me that is my brother, and I talk to you and I respect the years and knowledge you have. But they are the kind. I wish there were more people like you for have that kind of reasoning. What are the all this time not to work, brother? It not to work because the people aren't actively engaged. That's still top-down bureaucracy, and for the people becoming, and then people don't want to treat them like they're not people because of what they live or how they look or how they talk. Like we are human beings. So I definitely want to find out more about the office where I said that I built my pan, and I go talk to them because I'm like, listen now, we're not supposed to do exactly what my brother that's even said. So we are need for cascade. So don't have to give me some guidance. We are need for talk
Yeah,
because I'm excited.
yeah, but sister, let me give you a thing here, man. And I definitely, there is opportunity, like you said, there things could be done better, right? And there is opportunity to change it. But again, I will give you another perspective, and that is the reality thing. For me, you have to understand where you are, how things work, and what you really want to do, and to what extent that you would do this or not do that, or engage in with particular partners. Let me give you an example. From where I sit, it's undoubtable that the people on the ground, the NGOs, that they're on the ground and they're passionate about what they do. Yep. That is good. That connect is strong. The most successful NGOs that I've seen is those that have matched this passion with the security of the systems and actually meeting certain criteria there, right? And so there is something, and this is what I'm saying, sister, there is an avenue, and you would know that let's give an example, a government. A government receives money, or there's a particular project there. How the government actually shares the money is not just dependent in some instances on the government. It is dependent on what is coming down with the funders. The funders are saying that you could only action that money if the partners have these kind of transparent systems, etc., etc. The reality is that in most of the Caribbean countries, a lot of the NGOs don't meet these transparency thing there. And that is the action here. What I'm saying here, I'm not saying that it is fair or unfair. I'm saying that if you're interested in securing this here, you should know that if you're an NGO and you're seeking for that, this is the requirements there. You don't show up into a dance without the ticket and expect to just be let in, right? And so you should know, well, this is the ticket, and you decide as an NGO whether you want to pursue it within this set. But I have seen strong NGOs that are passionate. And even when we have projects, instead of just dismissing it because they don't meet the criteria, we provide the guidance to bring them up to this level where they have both the passion and also the requisite systems there to access it in line of the funding. Now that is independent of the NGO. The NGO, like you could say, could decide on its own merit. I do not want to go down that road, but I'm saying if you are interested in going down that road, be informed about what it comes with and decide whether you have prepared yourself adequately to do that. So, sister, I'm agreeing with you on the flip side in terms of what you said there. And definitely the system have to be, but the reality of the situation is that if you're talking about international money that is coming in there as well, there are certain safe checks, certain safe things, certain criteria that has to be met to actually do that. And unfortunately, either some of our budget and systems are not aware of it, and they do not prepare themselves adequately to be able to really be a strong person to actually get that. So there is not just one side of the story, sister. And that's what I'm saying. It is not just a system story, it's an I story. It is both pathways actually coming there. But overall, I do think that we could do much better, both in terms of the money, the governance, and everything around it to actually do something more positive.
But I think the sister and Dr. Roy about the NGOization of our countries. I not support non-governmental organizations. I don't. Because what happened, people who would have generally been activists in your community are now paid within NGO structures. And that's a whole circle again. So most community organizers, everyday people, will never go through the whole bureaucracy or red tape. Then just know the street flooded and then want to figure out how the street flooded. So I know, and that's why I've been intentional not to register our organization as an NGO. I say, listen, we could work without money, you know, because we been the work without money. Make it be very clear, money no move we. So all I want to depend upon money. I know the US the clamp down upon their money, then got that I don't want to issue because I've been the work without money. We have some small stipends that we get no again, no problem. But I know I change we integrity as an organization for me no keep the money because we want to maintain we integrity. At the same time, it still not mean that we not engage, that we not hold people accountable. Now, I know nobody else in the country where they did the work like how we did the work. Most of the other organizations have been compromised because who paid the piper called the tune. Eh? So it's outside of the system, I just set up for we learn as everyday people. Everyday people don't really want to learn the whole bureaucracy. They not, all they know is they got an issue. Yeah, you know how to fix this issue. You know the people that we could talk to. And I got a brother. I was Zoom him. We could go on community meeting, and the brother could tell you, the sister could tell you how to solve the issue. But I really sorry, brother, I could never make it today. But comprehensively, I appreciate the conversation and to be mindful that it's all connected. We're having I would say a human ecosystem conversation this morning, and the wealth of knowledge you brought, and then the everyday stories really give me hope. And we definitely have to have it back. Make I give you an opportunity for final thoughts. Where I want to left with you before you go. Make we fun about while we go about the rest of the day and tomorrow.
Yeah, well, sister, you said it very clearly. There are several things for me. One is that there is, at a personal level, there is things that continuity that would let your knowledge reflect your liberty as much as you can. So always push it there. Whether it is on an individual or community level, let it resonate and plant the seeds. That is the first thing. So let them appreciate that there are spaces between the spaces. Just like the sister and say that not everybody has to be an NGO. You could be community, you could do your thing, and there's a space for that. But also recognize that if you want to engage in certain spaces, you should know about it. You should really know, do your homework and know about it and decide whether that is a space you want to go through. And number three, I want to say that it is something that is very possible. It's not a far-fetched thing to say that there are communities that have not achieved it, that they are not livelihoods, or they have not spaces within our Caribbean that are showing the promises that are moving forward. I do think that the Caribbean is blessed with immense talent and passion, and we could do certain things. So let's try to do it, and let's have the conversations, the awareness, and support each other going forward.
Respect, big respect, brother. Before we go, today is Haitian Flag Day. 222 years since our African ancestors and ancestors, the only documented country, island in the world who freed themselves from enslavement, African people. And because of them, all are we free. And so today is a public and bank holiday in Haiti. UEF works closely with Haiti Action Committee, then we sister organization. And there are three asks at this time when it relates to today's Flag Day. And the demands are restitution and reparations now, demand the right to asylum for Haitian refugees, and demand to stop the flow of US-made weapons. So we got a big flag, the fly, Haitian flag, the fly front our Library of African Indigenous Studies. I hope it don't rain, I get it wet. But yesterday I got to put it up because we are in solidarity, because if they never second, we don't and they are know that. And secondly, tomorrow is May 19th. Brother ancestor Malcolm X would have been 100 years old, born May 1925. So definitely remember Brother Malcolm, call him tomorrow. Read something about and be inspired by him, and always know that we there because of we African ancestresses and ancestors. Because of them, we are. And not lose sight. I know it hard day to day, but I tell people the fact that we still there, we the win. And as long as we in a communication with one another, we the win. So we make them happy this morning. Again, thanks, Brother Doc Chaney. We appreciate the time. The security guard today was Shane Flowers. At XTV, we have the technical director, Alexi Bilal. At Crumb Radio, we have Larry Guerrero, known as Larry G. This show will repeat at 5:30 this evening. And remember, you could share the link if you go to XTV Belize YouTube, XTV Belize Facebook, and share the link with as many people as possible. Brother, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And thanks for your time. Only the people want to save the people.
God bless.
No Guatemala, this time we with a figure. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time my name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. No, tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people